just because I don't know about you, but it seems everyone's just a bit, I guess, disengaged with the whole process this
Look.
time.
Sorry to interrupt, but
No, you
I
go.
think you're right. I think it's an important consideration that you've raised. What I've discovered is the short time that we had for this election was deliberate. There was no question about it, and that's a typical tactic employed by a government that's worried about its chances of success. It's deliberately given the minimum time necessary to have a. We've lost our vision. Can you still see me?
Yeah,
Oh
I
yeah,
can still
gotcha.
see it. Yeah.
It's it's the minimum time given is inadequate, and considering the coalition, the meeting of the holiday period of Easter and Anzac Day, as well as the difficulties in actually registering as a new candidate, which takes up a bit of time as well. And on top of that, I know I'm whinge here, but on top of that, when you're a fair way away from places, like the election, like the AEC office, like we're about 150 kilometres away from it, it was a bit of a logistic nightmare to get out of our property just to get onto the road, let alone get to the AEC. That's not their problem, but still, it's one of those things. Now, one of the things that they also take into consideration, I believe, from what I've learnt now, is the pre-polling. You see, pre-polling, early voting, in other words, was never really, I believe, set up to have somebody just avoid going voting on the election day. It was actually for special purposes. Now, every man and his dog goes early, so it makes a voting day somewhat redundant, or in fact misleading, because in fact it gives you even less time to have a case to argue. And many thousands of people, millions of people, in fact, now pre-vote, early vote, and they've already not so much made up their mind, but they've been convinced by what they had available by that time. It's quite scurrilous, in my opinion, that they should have not only an early election, but also put up with pre-polling psychology, manipulation. They're actually really doing something quite it's reprehensible, because it's an undemocratic process that's being gradually put onto the people of Australia, and everyone thinks that it's a great idea that they go early to get out of the responsibility of going on a Saturday when they could easily go to the beach or the pub or something like that. It's just absolutely absurd. And the other thing is, why do people want to vote early other than, say, they have to leave the country in a hurry on the day of the election, or they're sick in hospital and have to have an operation, having their spleen removed or something, who knows. No, the reason why a lot of people want to vote early these day and age is because they're fed up with politics. They want it over and done with. It's a bit like, having a job you don't like. You just want to leave it. You want to get out of it. You want to leave it and get as quick as you possibly can. Well, that's understandable, but it's not really a good idea for people to live like that. They should take the democratic process seriously, in my opinion, and wait to the very last minute, if possible, to vote. Do you know, I waited till the last minute to lodge my candidature. I was only in just before the closing of the midday on the last day, because I wanted to make sure that I had all of the numbers for the endorsements correct, and I really was very careful about it. And I think that it's important for people to actually think carefully about what they're doing and use the time wisely, not throw it, not discard it like it's just an irritation. This is too important. Now, I'm nothing, I'm just a farmer in one sense, but in other, I'm a scientist by training, and I'm not stupid. I have a broad-based understanding of life. I've had many different jobs, because I had a competition with my friends growing up that who would have 100 jobs by the time they were 30, and I won, of course. I far exceeded it, and it was a silly thing to do in some ways, but it was a great thing in another way. It gave me many skills, and we had this competition to see who could get the most skills. And I worked in many government departments that people would have killed to work for, and just walked out after I learned how they worked or how they didn't work. And basically, I know how government works. I worked for the Health Commission, I worked for telecommunications, I worked for so many places. And I've seen how it works, how wonderful people do fantastic jobs, and how people, for the most part, are trapped in a desperate state of unhappiness because they can't do anything else. Like teachers, for instance. I've never been a teacher, but I've watched them, rotting on the vine as I've grown up, because their institution was gradually being wrecked. around them, and children were going ever increasingly out of control. When children are burning down the classroom and the teacher is too afraid to turn around and look at it because it's too stressful, you've got to say to yourself, there's something wrong with the education system, and the teachers are being handed a poison chalice now.
Yeah.
And I pity all of them. I pity all the kids. I pity the teachers, the parents, the whole thing. Why is this the case? Right now, I'm going to give you a ramble here.
Go for it.
Look, I'm not a politician, and I'm not as good as the people that run the country. I'm not going to put dirt on them in the sense that, they haven't got their hand on their heart when they start. They're genuine people, but some of them, I won't mention names, but some of them got their hand on their heart and their foot in their mouth at the same time. And you think to yourself, well, why am I listening to this person? Because after a while, you realise that they're not there for the reasons now that they originally probably started out as, and that's always been something of concern to me, that good people are rendered ineffective by a system that's so unwieldy. And we just had someone say to us the other day, it's very much in politics, look, they're not all good people out there, Richard, and I was a bit sort of surprised at some of the reactions that people have, saying I tear down people's signs and replace them with mine and rubbish like that. Actually, ours have been torn down, but I would never do such a thing. And they do silly things. They abuse you in the street, and other times they throw their arms around you with joy that you're they're like their saviour or something. And people I don't even know throw their arms around me and say, have you been vaccinated? Because you might have spike protein spraying all over me. What are you doing? Now, look, I'm pretty able to answer any of your questions, and I'm not trying to be all things for all people, but I have a lot of experience, and I think I know how to unravel a lot of their problems. I don't expect to do it, but I expect them to at least try and listen to some of the ideas that I think are worth serious consideration. Number one is that they should abandon the idea of a nuclear energy system. And don't just assume that I'm pro-coal or anti-coal or anything like that. Just deal with one fact at a time, isolate your variables and deal with them as they come across. Nuclear just isn't a viable economic option. They know this. If they don't know this, then they should hand in their economics degrees and their whatever political degrees, whatever they got on the what do they call themselves, the Liberal National Party. These people are completely either lying to us, bald-faced liars, or they are blindly bluffed by foreign multinational corporates who want to put their hand in our pocket as a nation for the next 100 years, paying off the money it's going to cost, minimum 100 years, to build 7 or however many nuclear reactors they want to build. I don't want to hear about rubbish of nuclear reactors costing $600 billion. $600 billion, what are they, gold and yellow, special no-frills nuclear reactors. You're not going to build 7 nuclear reactors for $600 billion. You're not going to build, but you probably might build 2 or 3, because since no nuclear reactor's been built in under 10 years, and I think about 2 have been built under 20, and they're virtually, inadequate. So you're looking at 20 years, and in 20 years, can you imagine $600 billion, they won't even touch the sides in 20 years' time. 20 years' time, at the rate of inflation that's out of control on a planetary scale, I think the numbers are going to be astronomical as to what we're going to face as a bill. But that's not the main reason why it's going to be uneconomical. The big reason is that the 450-odd nuclear reactors that are already built, many of them are already past their use-by dates, and they're seriously reaching the stage where they might have to be rebuilt. So you're going to have great competition amongst the nuclear reactor builders of the world to replace the ones that are already in service in hundreds of cases. And they're not going to be able to do that easily. And then the ones that are going to be more or less pulled down, how are they going to do that? Even the ones that have, this is not an easy task, just building a nuclear reactor on its own, because it's not on its own. It's an industry that's in crisis because of the fact that the high-grade uranium, it's in 3 main parts of the planet: Australia, Africa, and Canada. There's little bits elsewhere, but we've got the mother lode. Well, it's all contracted to the rest of the world already. So where's ours coming from, firstly? And if you look at how much we've got of high-grade uranium, well, where's it going to come from in 10 years' time when it runs out? because it's got the maximum lifespan of the existing known reserves of high-grade uranium is about a decade with the existing demand on it. So we're going to be forced to use our new nuclear reactors, our top of the art, straight out of Woolworths and Coles nuclear reactors, because they're specials. They're on specials at 600 billion. These special nuclear reactors are going to be running on low-grade fuel. That's going to make a bit of a problem, a bit of a dent in the cost of running them for a start, because most of the low-grade is much more difficult to get. It's because it's in countries that you really don't want to go to, and tell them you want all their rocks and minerals and so on and so forth. So it's not good. It doesn't add up. It's a waste of time. The better alternative, without putting dirt on their dream and scheme, the better idea is to use undersea current generators. Along the east coast of Australia, there's a little thing called the East Australian Current, right? It runs 24/7, it's powering along on the bottom there. Yeah, she's really churning. You just plant these undersea current and wave generating systems, which are old technology, dirt cheap technology, on the floor of the ocean, 10 or 20 k off the coast, and don't worry about the resistance of generating fuel, generating electricity with a generator 20 k out. The cables and the resistance is caused by three main things: the length of the cable, the diameter of the cable, and the temperature of the cable. So the temperature of the transmission line. So basically, you can control all those quantities. You can easily do this. You can pump it from 10 to 20 k to the coast, and all of the coastal cities could be fed with electricity for virtually nothing. Forget about this rubbish of 40,000, whatever. There's rubbish to talk about. The undersea current generator option is so good, so easy, and environmentally, no dramas. You'd have a little bit of trouble with the environmental impact studies that would be required to do it, because, environmental impact workers, they're a bit like, they try to, reinvent the wheel every time they go out and try and, they look at a little flower on the ground, they go, oh, look, isn't it a pretty little thing? They're getting $350 an hour or $500 an hour, these guys, and they're looking at a flower because they get engrossed in their beauty of what they're looking at. Oh, it's so lovely and so on. And the reports can take weeks, months, years sometimes to compile, because they're perfectionists. They sit there, it takes an environmental consulting company much more time to actually do the reports than it does the field work. And some of the field work can take a year to do. So environmental studies in Australia, they're good, but they need a bit of a kick up the bum.
I think they're very subjective. I think it depends on who is commissioning the study and the outcome that the paying authorizer would like to see. That's been my experience anyway.
Yeah. Well, you're right on the money there, because, and using that sort of phrasing, you're right on the money. Who pays the piper calls the tune type of science is not science. It's not the way the Australian environmental industry has been corrupted, captured by vested interest, corporate structures, and government. By the way, government's right into it too. They have gone and created hitmen that are effectively hitmen that are going out and making sure that projects go ahead. Oh, forget about that. Oh, deregister that species. Oh, don't care about. Oh, we didn't really find that one. It's probably not there, but they didn't look, or they sent someone out that didn't know how to find them, or couldn't identify anything. The whole thing is corrupted by incompetence, by inadequacy, lack of understanding, deliberate agendas of development. Development is you're an enemy of the state if you oppose a development half the time. Going out and finding what the truth is, what? We don't need that. And if you try and save endangered species, someone will come out of a religious group and say you're interfering in God's work. If you're in science, in biology, you've really got a lot of work on your shoulders, if you want to be honest, and tell them that koalas actually are worth saving, not just because everyone likes them, but because they're an essential part of an eucalypt ecosystem. And you've got to really explain the complexity of the environmental ecosystem dynamics that no one understands, because no one's ever gone in and studied it properly. We don't even know what species are on this continent. There's millions of undescribed species. Millions, not thousands, millions. And if we don't understand the complexity of the biodiversity of the continent, how can we understand the ecosystem dynamics that are going on between those species? Oh, species one, species, does this, no one knows. And so they send out all these people who can't identify anything anyway, and they've just been trained by a university system that's like a sausage production factory They're squeezing out these people as quick as they can that know nothing. And I've hired them. I know what they're like. And all I can say is I feel for them. They think they're environmental biologists, but most of the time they're warm and lovely feelings about saving the world. No matter how hard they try, the forces above them will make sure they do what they have to be done. To do.
I think there's a lot of disillusioned people in a number of industries who went into it with the best intentions, and then the powers that be have squashed that out of them.
Yeah. Well, intelligent, inspirational, visionary leadership. This is what's required at all levels of society, not just in politics. Intelligent, inspirational, visionary leadership. So if somebody is going out and doing a job, they've got to be intelligent, inspirational, and visionary leader. Lead their way through to the truth, to actually make things matter. Nothing in this country can be a problem if it's approached the right way. Nothing. There's not a problem we can't solve. The economy is almost as big as Russia's, and we say we can't afford to feed the homeless and put roofs over people's heads. They say we can't afford it. One guy said to me the other day, he said, how the hell are you going to get the money to provide homes for the homeless and food for the hungry? I said, well, how can we not afford to do it? How can a country as rich as Australia have any standing in the world if we stand by and allow stupid situations like the United States to emerge, where they have thousands of people living under bridges, under cardboard boxes and crap? We've seen the future and we can easily avoid it. And yet here we are rushing off saying, how can we afford to feed people? How can we afford to put roofs over the top of these bludgers that don't want to get a job? Or these dirty, rotten migrants that come out and steal all our houses and steal our jobs. Listen, I'll tell you something. Australia should never forget that it once had a big heart to help the innocent, the weak, and the needy. Should never forget that, because that is what makes us better than anywhere else in the world to be. Our country, citizens only look like Americans. We don't think like them. I'm not anti-American. I've got a family over there. I know what they're like. One of my family died in the Alamo with Davy Crockett. My family goes back a long way in the United States as it does in Australia. We came here in 1792. And I'll tell you what an Australian is. An Australian is not where you come from. It's not how long you've been here, and it's not how rich you are or what colour your skin is or what religion you are. It's nothing to do with any of that stuff. Not how powerful you are, not what family you belong to. What an Australian is how you treat other people. It's being fair dinkum. It's being true blue. It's being standing by your mates. It's not stacking on a blue. It's standing up for what is right. And if people pick on us, as I say, we don't stack on a blue, but they pick on us and their backs to the wall, we'll fight, because that's what you got to do. But our basic nature is to not do. You just don't stack on a blue. It's not an Australian thing to do. That's why the American situation, where they always have a war with somebody, and stupid politicians in Australia put up a hand and say, "Can we come too? Can we come too?" What the hell? Australians were in more wars in the 20th century than any other country, any other Western country, because of this nonsense of we've got to join forces because we naturally don't mind a fight. We will have a fight, but we don't like stacking on a blue. We shouldn't. That's our nature, not our nature. It should be our nature to actually live in peace with the world. We don't need nuclear submarines to antagonise our biggest trading partner. Why would you have 3 stupid submarines that we're not going to get for 40 years or whatever? It's going to cost us, I don't know, how many billions? I can't imagine. What is it, 300? The numbers of billions are beyond
ridiculous. Yeah.
I mean, a billion nowadays is never like a billion in the past, as Packard used to say. But realistically, it's just rubbish. We don't need the submarines. You know what you need? You need intelligence. You need to actually finally. These people need to just go out and actually open their hearts instead of their brains for a while. Think from where the feelings of your life come from. It's easy for you to understand this because you're a woman, right? Now, okay. I'm a practical sort of person, but I do know my weaknesses. Men are sort of trapped in the reductionist mindset. We charge over the trenches if we have to have an argument. The bayonet must be fixed on the gun as we charge over. There must be so many bullets in our pockets, and we got to know that we're basic units, right? But women have intuitive thinking, judgment, heart. This is where they're connected to source. They're connected to God. They're connected to. This is how it happens through the quantum energetic fields of the universe that connects everything. Men can do it too. Men have got it. We've all got it. But men, you generally don't like that sort of stuff. It's a bit touchy-feely for me, mate. And as a consequence, it's a bit of a sheeler approach. This one, I don't know. But if you use both, I've always shown men how to use their feelings, their emotional, intuitive judgment. Subconscious analytical reasoning is a pathway to intuitive judgment and thought. They become better people, so much better, and they make the best decisions because they're not bluffed by the crap that goes on with the reductionist mindset. You see, and so where are we now? Well, basically, what we're facing now with the government at the present time, you've got two major parties, the Labor Party and the National Party and the Liberals together. They're a bit like trying to punch. They're in the same boat and they're trying to punch a hole in the bottom of the boat to let the water out, because they're overloading the boat with them, and they're saying, well, let's get the water. We're sinking, so we have to punch a hole in the bottom of the boat to make sure we don't sink. They're going in the wrong direction. They've got to actually start working together, and they're not going to do that. What they're saying? So they could do it, but not easily. There was noticed the other day on the news. They said, look, they're fearing a hung parliament where there's going to be a coalition of the unbelievably unrelated groups joining forces to form government.
I think that should be something that we should fear, though.
Fear?
Yeah, I don't think we should be fearing that.
Oh, you know what I do? Oh, let me open up your fears and show you how bad it can really be. What I would do is a little different. I would say, well, look, in how many independents have been elected? Let's say we had a whole. I can afford to do this, right? Because I'm only an independent. I'm punching way above my weight here. So the chances, I'm just little. But just imagine, hypothetically, I was elected. Somebody elected me. Well, a group of people elected me. I got in there. Something miraculous, right? And Kevin Hogan didn't commit suicide at the thought of it. Basically he managed to keep his head together for a moment over the shock of it. But say I did get elected, what would I do? Well, probably not much. I'm only one person, maybe. But say it was a hung parliament, and say my vote was important, and they come toddling up to me and with all these presents and all these great ideas of and how much they'd help me do what I want to do and some of what I'd like to see done. And I'd say to myself, well, you're going the wrong direction, mate. You've got to stop and listen to me. I'm coming to you. And I'm saying to you, all of you independents, all of you small parties, I want you to get your act together. And we'll all join forces. And we're going to pick the eyes out of the National Party, the Liberal Party, the Labor Party, and the Greens. And we're going to find the best of all these people. And we're going to say, leave the parties and come with us and form government. We form the government. Now, I don't want to be Führer, but I've got to tell you, that's a bit of a possibility that is a bit scary for some people. But actually, the net gain by bringing the best together to form government is look like a bit like an Italian parliament for a while, with fighting and crazies flowing.
I don't think it could get any worse than it's been. So
no, it very couldn't. So basically, it'd be the headline. It'd be generating headlines for the media on a scale unprecedented in Australian political history. They'd love it. The headlines would be sell newspapers massively. The media, TV would have a resurgence of interest in it. People would come back to TV watching. My God, have you seen Parliament? There's 150 people or whatever fighting, and they're all a part of it, but they actually come to some understanding about something.
They'd all have to show up and listen, and they wouldn't just be in their party rooms. They'd actually have to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, and they wouldn't have to be like now, with half of them are asleep. You watch them on TV, and they're unconscious in the chair or falling over on the footpath drunk or whatever. Who knows? I don't want to mention any names, but the reality of it is people have stresses and problems and so on, so they can't do their best. But I really think that we haven't explored all the options of government in Australia, that we've relied upon the major parties to be our saviours. Who says that Dutton has to be the next Prime Minister? The intellectual, the political arrogance of this, the pseudo-intellectual arrogance of it, to think that it's his turn, that, Albanese's gone, then it's my turn to be the Prime Minister. It's not his turn to be the Prime Minister if he doesn't get re-elected. It's probably someone else's turn to be the leader of the Liberal Party in the near future. But I won't mention names, but I could see a few contenders probably hovering around the edges of it like dragonflies at the edge of a swamp. But look, if you give it, if you really, it's hilarious to me. This whole thing is so madly silly. because some of these people are among the most intelligent people Australia has ever produced, probably. And they're all in this locked party controlled behavioural system because they think that that's how you govern. You don't govern like that. How you
I think
govern.
there's a risk of people when they get into politics, even for the right intentions, that the risk within the party politics is that it becomes about becoming a career politician, and it's more about progressing their own career and position within the party than serving the people who elected them, is what I find.
Yeah, well, who elected them? The people elected them. I mean, everyone said to me, "Oh, look, you're number one on the docket, right?" I didn't go to the AEC thing where they draw the marble out with a number on it, right? I didn't even know you could go to it, right? And so all the candidates went to it, and they're all hovering over the bin, waiting for the number one to come, and they go, "Oh, it's seen me with number one on the bin. Oh my God!" And then it's immediate press releases saying, "Well, no, people shouldn't vote donkey vote. They should have a sensible reason." But none of them would have said a word if they got the number one. It's a weird. This is the kind of madness that overwhelms people seeking the very responsible position of governing Australia. They want to really do their best. And number one is, who number one is on the ballot? Number one is the people of Australia. It's not me. It's not anyone else. It's number one is the people of Australia. It's not even a doubt in my mind about that. I didn't even issue a how to vote slip. I don't do that. I don't tell people how to vote. I'm not interested. You vote. Your heart has to direct who you vote for. You vote for me, fantastic. You vote for someone else, fantastic. It's who you believe, based on your best judgment, is capable, is able to do the job. That's important. That's really what it's all about. Look, you can ask me any question you like on any policy. I've got millions of ideas, but ideas are a dime a dozen when you're sitting on a farm paddock trying to chase Brahman bulls across the paddock, and no one listens to you. And I've talked to the magpies. I said, "Listen, what would you do?" And the magpies look at you and go, "Don't go there." The magpies know more about this than most people. So I've learned a lot about how not to deal with some problems. Now look. But I do watch what's going on, and I have, because I'm, relatively older than most people, I'm perfectly qualified for the Parliament. If Trump can get in, mate, if he's, and Biden and all these other leaders around the world, most of them are very, they're elderly people, they're more mature, and, I looked at it and I thought, that's not an impediment to leading or being a part of a government. In fact, it's an asset. Anybody that gets into Parliament that's got grey hair and that's more than 50 years of age, you've got to take them seriously, because they've probably been through the meat grinder. They've had a hard life, and the decision making is probably. And if you look at the younger ones, the boisterous ones that are very intelligent, very capable, and so on, you probably think, yeah, they're a bit sort of too enthusiastic for their own good. They sort of pull back a bit. It's like people often say, "Oh, let's go and have a fight with Russia." So Albanese organises a sending across of peacekeepers in inverted commas to the Ukraine. Peacekeepers, the thin edge of the wedge of a military conflict, right? It's a participatory process of militarisation of us and against them. I'm not for that. I don't want to have any arguments with anybody involved, not with Ukraine or with the Russians or anyone. The Chinese, none. You know what? They've all got families. They've got little children, and their societies are thousands of years old, in some cases, like the Chinese. These people have got so much good things about them that far exceed any of the silliness that some of their people have done. You've got to bring together the best of what people do and build on that, not the build on, "Oh, I don't like this Putin," or "I don't like this Zelensky," or "I don't like this." They're all these negative. Forget it. I know that what you find is that if you focus on what is good, you'll find that you won't have to deal with someone like Putin or any of these other people. I know they're all. I'm not saying you put your head in your sand and they're going to everything's going to be nice and rosy and no one's going to have a go at you eventually. But look at the question the other night on TV between Dutton and Albanese. Who do you think will invade Australia? Do you think Australia could be invaded by a country, and who would it be? Well, obviously it was China. That was the one they wanted him to say. Well, Albanese didn't want to say it. He goes, but he knew it was China in the boat. Because that's what the Vox Populist, the popular view is, that China's the big bad boogie band that can do it. Listen to me. Australia is not going to be invaded by anyone except probably rich people wanting to destroy our economy for their own benefit. I mean, it's already happened. But during the Second World War, the Japanese had a massive internal fight about the actual invasion of Australia. Their intentions to invade Australia were the Army wanted one way, but the Navy didn't want to do another. And the reason why Australia is one of the most difficult places on the planet to have a military operation on. The Japanese at the time said they'd need 6 divisions to take Australia, but they knew that was the whole military force in Asia that they had already captured. They didn't even have enough soldiers. Australia was so hard because the population wasn't many people, but it was scattered all over the place. And they were armed to the teeth, by the way, as well. But that didn't make much difference to the Japanese. Australia was self-sufficient in everything, in food production, in manufacturing, everything. It was the only other place in Asia, including Australia, is technically not really part of Asia, but let's call it part of Asia.
Asia Pacific, yeah.
Yeah, it is Asia Pacific. Australia was the only country other than Japan that was self-sufficient and highly industrialised and manufacturing power. It was totally independent, and only Japan was like that in Asia, other than Australia. So they didn't want to touch Australia. And the great leaders of the military world, whoever they are, would all know this. This is not a country that's a pushover. And if you were crazy enough to get to Australia with an army or whatever to attack us, and it happened on a Friday night or a Saturday night when everyone's gone to the pub, the next day it would be hell for whoever invaded Australia. This country is full of people that just wouldn't take it. They were the most difficult people in the world to invade. And I know from friends that know a lot more about military matters than most people, and they say to me, this is just a joke to say Australia could be invaded and kept by a foreign party. It wouldn't last. It'd be a 10-year guerrilla war, but you'd get rid of them. Now, let me just say with something more important, and that is how good it is to have a world free of war, how good it is to have a world full of peace and prosperity. With the wealth of this planet, how can anyone anywhere have no food? How can anyone have no home? See? So what are the things that have happened? Well, it's just the corporatisation of the world. I'm not a commo. I'm not a red ragger. I'm a reasonable person. It just, to me, seems wrong that we've spent our time building great institutions, then to some government to come along and sell it to a corporate structure, like our telecommunication systems, our water systems, our health systems, our education systems, our transportation system, our food production systems, our agricultural our mining companies, our mineral resources, you name it, our energy sources, on and on and on it goes. We've sold them all, and sell the post office, sell this, stuff. They'll sell everything that's not nailed down. What a pack of half-hearted. They can't be called economists. They're predators. They're like the worst of the robber barons. They're the people who do this. The ancient Roman Empire was faced with the barbarians all around them. These are the barbarians that have come and sold us out. They're barbarians. Because no right-thinking individual would give away something like we had. We had in Telstra, when I worked for Telecom, I was in cable protection, and there were 80,000 employees of Telecom at the time. 80,000.
Wow.
And you think, wow. But it was, people had phones. Phones were everywhere. They put phone lines kilometres across paddocks. And when a bushfire was on, they didn't have to wait for some kind of special emergency declaration to restring the fires. Telecom had workers running behind the fires, putting up new cables, you see, or floods. They'd be wading through the water with new cables because they were dedicated to the protection of the systems that they had. They were for us all, And it was the same with the Department of Public Works, building roads. If there was a pothole on the road, it was like, it was what? And it was for all action stations. Everyone went out with their trucks and buckets of mud and crap and shovels and everything, and they fixed the hole, bang, 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 bang. And yeah, sure, bludgers are everywhere. But the fact is they had a system that really worked. The mail, everything worked well. It was like a machine. It was a machine that was dedicated to doing their job. And for Dutton to come along and say he wants to sack 40,000 public servants, what? Why would you sack anybody? Why would anyone work in the public service for a start, given the systems they got to work in? I mean, it's beyond my comprehension, but, it's so hard. It would be so hard nowadays. But to sack people, to actually put the knife through a family's income, the breadwinner loses his job, or the family has, mortgages to pay, families to feed, but they would just say, no. you employ people. And if you can't figure out how to employ more people, you're brain dead. Because with all the work that needs to be done in Australia, we haven't got enough people. We don't need as much. Our immigration levels are a bit high. And I say that not without any reflection on the people that are coming here. It's us. We're the problem. Australia is the problem. When it hasn't built enough homes, it hasn't built enough schools and hospitals, that's the measure of the immigration rate. What we can afford to look after is what should dictate who comes here and when. You know, the idea of just we're going to have 1 million this year or something. Where are they going to live? What are they going to eat? This is a madness. It's bad planning, and it's gone on time and time again. Immigration is not a boogeyman, but it can become a really big problem if it's not carefully managed. So you manage it from the bottom up. You know, you say, look, we're going to have this first. And I got another idea about immigration. I reckon a lot of them around the world are sitting out there, they're wasted people. They've got degrees, they're highly experienced, they're qualified and so on, like plenty of people in Australia too. But we could start going out and poaching them, you know, and bringing them here. Well, we used to do it, but we could do it much better. You know, we could do it much better. We could say to the United Nations, listen, we know you haven't got much money to look after the people of the world, because it costs a lot of money to look after each person that's starving in whatever country in the world. The United Nations is costs trillions of dollars to look after the rest of the world. We say to the UN, listen, how about we do a deal with you? You send us, we'll take so many refugees. If you write us a check out, so say 5 million for each one, the family, call it one's a family, whatever, $5 million. I'll take 5 million. And that's cheaper, by the way, than leaving them where they are and trying to stop them, killing one another and burning their cities down and starving to death and creating all sorts of other problems. So you give us $5 million, we'll take one of your refugee families and we'll put them in a country town and we'll give that 5 million to the country town for every one of them, right? So country towns would be lining up all over Australia saying, bring me immigrants. I want all the immigrants you can give me, because you'd have a brand new hospital like Westmead's Hospital. You'd have a complete education system. It's like a mini university in every little country town. You'd have every conceivable kind of service and whatever you ever need. Every doctor's begging to go there. So the whole country could be growing on the basis of a dirt cheap deal with the UN. And if they can't negotiate that, then mate, look, I'm used to, we Julie and I, we round up our cattle and we do all sorts of things. We're capable. If we can do things we can do, they can do that. That's dead easy compared to what we do. So it's a simple thing. And now it's actually probably more lucrative than 5 million. I'm going a bit cheap here, I think, not because we need more money for them. We can actually do that and make a profit, but at 5 million. But I think it could end up generating money in itself because it value adds the country. Every person you get is a value added component to the society you've got. You know, it's like a book. If I buy a book and it costs me, say, $10, right? And I've got a lot of books. Now,
I feel like we could be friends because I also have a lot of books.
You have a lot of books? How many books you got?
I don't even know how to count.
Huh?
I have lost count of how many books.
This is not alcohol. This is Coca-Cola.
Don't worry. There's no judgment here.
I was told 60 years ago I wasn't told 60 years ago this was dangerous for you. Why wouldn't they tell me? 60 years ago I've been drinking Coca-Cola. Yeah. Now, let me tell you. What's that, sweetie? Yeah, I haven't. What were you saying?
Oh no, it's fine. Keep going.
Oh yeah. So anyway, I look at it as being the future and the potential of the country is, look, it's unlimited. And if I bought a book for $10, the book cost me $10. It's about values. What value has that book? $10. Well, but if I open it up, one day I bought a book for 20 cents at a library book fair sale, right? And it was a book on weeds. And the cover was torn off it, and it was complete, but it looked like it'd been run over with a D9 bulldozer. It was completely wrecked. It was just wrecked. But it was Weeds of Australia, a major work. And the library couldn't afford to rebind it, so they decided to throw it out on their junk table for 20 cents. So I grabbed this 20-cent book, and I walked home with it, and I thought, And I started going through it. Oh, blackberries. I'm reading about privet and blackberries, all these plants. And I just read this little article in the Sydney Morning Herald that a developer had problems with weeds along a creek and that it was interfering with the subdivision. So I thought, I'll go out and see this. So I rang this guy up. I saw your article in the Sydney Morning Herald, and he said, yeah, who are you? And I said, well, I'm nobody. I'm just Richard. And I said, can I come out and talk to you about your problem? Because I'd read all these weed articles, you see, in this book, about 10 pages, 20 pages. It wasn't much, but I knew a lot about weeds then. I'd read all the references. I just was curious about this weed problem he had. And so I wanted to figure out if I could help him. And I said, can you show me what the problem is? He said, well, who are you? And I said, well, I just saw your article, the article about your development being frozen in the Herald, and I thought, it might be easy to solve. He said, oh, look, I've had Sinclair, Knight, Mertz, and all these big companies. They've all come out here and they said it's impossible to finish and so on. I thought, okay, right, that's okay. I'm not interested in that. I want to see myself. He said, what do you mean? I said, do you take me down there to the place? I said, have you actually gone down there yourself? He says, well, no, I haven't been down there. I get a lot of people, they gather reports, and they tell me it's hopeless, it's impossible. There's a dam there, and it's feeding, it's a spring, it's feeding this endangered species of a frog. You know, it's an endless thing, and the weeds are in the way, and I can't touch the weeds because it's going to affect the frogs. I don't know what to do, right? So I go down there, I'm standing there, and I looked at the dam. It's supposed to be on a spring, and I know how dams are built. This wasn't built on a spring, and the water that was coming down the middle of the dam wall wasn't coming from the dam itself. It was actually coming from one side of the hill. It was running down the hill that way, and the other side of the hill was running down that way. It was meeting in the middle of the dam and going down the hill. It wasn't coming out of the dam at all. It was actually runoff from the hills on the other side. And I thought, this is wrong. Number one, it was wrong. And then I heard the frog calling, croak, 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 croak. And they said this was Pseudophony australis, but I already knew the frog call was Pseudophony australis wasn't that, and so that's the Crinia signifera call. It just sounds like it, but it was not the same. And there's another one, Pseudophony biberni, which is not endangered also, and this sounds slightly different. So I knew the difference between the frog. I heard them on frog tape, so I knew all those. And I thought, they've made number two error. They're supposed to be an endangered frog. It's not an endangered frog. Not that the unendangered frogs aren't worth protecting, but, you know, it was wrong. And then they said, oh, it's a rare eucalypt forest and so on and so forth. And I looked at it, I said, well, okay. I took a sample of the leaves. I thought, put that in my back pocket. And then I walked down and showed me on the creek. I said, okay, look at that. And I had the guy, the developer, the owner, on the property. And I was showing him, you got to get him on the ground. You got to hold the thing in your hand, you know. And I showed him why it was wrong. And he said he was going to kill his engineers and he was going to kill the environmental company. He was joking, but he was upset. He spent a huge amount of money and his whole development was crippled. And I said, no, look, I'll tell you what, I'll fix this for you. I'll do a report for you. I'll get it. And first thing I rang up a mate of mine who was an engineer. I said, listen, do you want a day's work? Come down here. This guy will pay you to write a report on where the water's coming from that dam. Number one, tick. Solve the problems. Isolate your variables. Look at the complexity of it. Break them apart piece by piece. Solve the problems, not all at once, in a fury of chaos and confusion, but do it in a manner that's understanding, spreads understanding and ownership of the idea, the problem that you're trying to solve. They all start to work together solving the problem, and then they see the outcome is not going to be bad or not going to be wrong. It's going to be beneficial. And those weeds that were there were the ones that I read about in this weed book that I paid 20 cents for. And then I said, well, look, your weeds, they can easily be cured. They can easily be eliminated by this, and this. I read in this book, you know. So I knew it. He said, how do you know all this stuff? I said, well, I don't know. It's just in my head. Anyway, so I spent a day and a half helping him. And I arrived there in my old overalls and my old Kingswood, you know, just nothing, no flash vehicle. And I disappeared. And this guy, I gave him my phone number. Anyway, he rang me up and he said, listen, you haven't sent me a bill. I said, I just did it to help you, you know. He said, the council's approved me project. He said, Westpac was on the verge of wiping me out for 23 million. And I'm now in front. He said, I've got to pay you for the day and a half. I said, look, just whatever, I don't care. It doesn't worry me. It's a day and a half, that was all. And so I didn't worry. Anyway, my then other wife at the time, I'm not collecting wives, but anyway, another earlier wife. Anyway, she goes up and checks the mailbox, and there was a check in the mailbox for $23,000. He gave me $23,000 for 1.5 days' work. For that 20-cent book, I got $23,000. So it's the applications along to a twisted story is that the value systems that you decide to live by determine not only how you approach your life, but how successful you can be. And I always value a book's value as infinite because the potentials are infinite. The value is infinite. And it's like someone says, oh, that land over there, I'm looking at distance to Karamba here now, and they say, oh, that's rough country. It's full of plants and, jungle and everything and so on. It's not worth much. Down that paddock there where the cattle are, that's the high value land. They've got all this value system, right? But what price do you put on beautiful, irreplaceable? What price do you put on unspeakably great or rare? You know, the biodiversity in there has a value that's beyond money, but it has a value on money too, which far exceeds the land value there, because you can make biobanking credits for that bush on there, which will make the landowner far much more money than the cows. In fact, he shouldn't even be getting rid of his cows. He should be leaving them there to manage the property so we can increase the populations of macropods and have more kangaroos and wallabies. And, you know, that's good because it increases the biodiversity and the resilience of the eucalypt forests in which they live also. So, you know, the cows can become a management tool, not a sandwich or a hamburger. I mean, it's just a low value. You see, it's all about the values you ascribe to something. So what value do you ascribe to the Labor government at the moment? No, not very high, because it's not really coming up with what we'd like to see, to say, oh, we're going to put one minute they say they're going to put a tax, I'll get rid of, some tax on, you're selling your home and you want to split the capital gains. They're going to get rid of that, or now they're saying they're not going to touch it in 10-foot pole because they're on the verge of a mass rebellion over it, or they're going to get rid of something like a tax on unappreciated capital gains on assets like your superannuation, which would not make much money at all. In fact, it's really going towards land and ownership of homes. So I'll be on your second home or your third home or something like that. Eventually, it goes down to third, to second, to one. Next, you've got to pay something every year as your homes are increasing in value. That's the ultimate dream that they have, which is a nonsense and would never make any money, because people would then abandon their homes and rich people would buy them, and then you wouldn't be able to rent them at a reasonable price anyway, because they've got to make money. So all those systems were tried in the 80s and they failed. So to do that, to go there again is a silliness. So their value is a bit low at the moment. Even if they change their mind, I don't trust them. And then the Democrat, the National Party and the Liberals, building submarines and nuclear reactors, there's something wrong with them. Economically, as I said, it doesn't add up. And then they've got no leadership. This nonsense of taking on, look what they're doing, talking about war with Russia and China. How could they even mention it? How could they even contemplate such a madness? No one would win. No one. It would be a catastrophe. And then we're talking about climate. Everybody says that climate change is not real, right? Well, it is real. Climate change is real. Climate change is very real. I can tell you why the climate's changing. And it's not really because of coal. I'm not for coal. Coal's a dirty thing. Burning coal is a bit stupid, because you can make really industrial lubricants out of it, which are far more valuable. Why would you burn something you can make lubricants which are a short supply around the world? Or will become increasingly short supply. So coal makes great lubricants. So why burn it? But forget coal. If you clean coal up like the Chinese have done, you could use it, no worries. You could scrub it of all this toxic gases and crap, and it would be okay. But that humans do affect the climate. You can't clear the Amazonian rainforest and not have an effect on the global climate. You can't go and clear forests all over the world and reduce the uptake of CO2 or whatever. CO2 is not a problem, by the way, but you can't actually bugger around with forest ecosystems and think it's not going to affect the climate. It's going to wreck rainfall patterns. It's going to increase aridity. It's going to be bad. It's going to increase salinity with all the toxins you put in the atmosphere, as well as acidity. Yeah, humans can affect the climate. But the actual effects of humans on the climate is around about 20%. The 80% is actually driven mostly by the sun. And the sun is currently goes through cycles. You have 11-year solar, max solar minimum, everyone will be familiar with it. It goes through a 3,000-year cycle, a 6,500-year cycle, a 12,500-year cycle. It's many cycles. This is complex. I'll give you a talk in Astrophysics 101, but basically it's the sun. And the Tyrannosaurus Rex in the room is the sun. And they know it at the highest levels. The IPCC currently with their many thousands of climatologists saying we're doing this and we're doing that. Actually, they're not really all that experienced in climatology. A lot of them are not even climatologists, but they know now, because the data's coming in. Inarguable that the sun is the main driver through the global electric circuit, affecting the magnetic fields of the Earth, affecting the climate on a global scale. the full story of how the Earth is being affected by this climate change now started about in roughly 1705 at the end of what's called the Maunder Minimum. It was a mini ice age. That at that point, this is the hockey stick drawing. There's a sudden increasing temperature of the Earth, which they said when the Industrial Revolution started, we started burning coal, and up goes the temperature. Well, sorry, it was the end of a mini ice age, and the Earth started warming because the sun was starting this thing it does every 12,500 years back then, and the Industrial Revolution polluted the Earth, no question about that, made a heck of a mess. But it is contemporaneous with that global change from the sun. And I can prove it all. I've got all the hardcore, I'm not talking about dicky Facebook posts or stupid YouTube videos, hardcore scientific peer-reviewed literature, and it's thousands of papers on it, and they don't want to talk about it because there's nothing you can do about it, because it's going to happen. And well, there is something you can do about it. You can clean the world up. Anyone that comes out and says coal's dirty and bad and probably stop and so on and so forth, well, they're going to wreck the economy for sure. They're going to wreck, but you can save the economy by going into ocean current generation and clean energy like solar. Wind farms and chuck them away. Get rid of them. They're rubbish. There's a massive loss. It's one of the stupidest things ever created. These giant windmills. Everyone wants to be Dutch. Put a giant windmill up in your backyard, out in the oceans, and think that the world's going to be much better. No, it's not. I mean, that's a big mistake. I mean, I've seen one that blew up with a lightning strike. Oh my God. The amount of money it would cost to clean that side up would be astronomical. No one knows who's going to do that in 20 or 30 years when they're no longer operational, or at the best. So but solar's fantastic. It can be made even better. There's new solar panels that actually produce more power than nuclear reactors do, solar panel system. So, you can really, solar's great. It's not the only one. Hydro's great. The marine thing I mentioned earlier was great. It's all doable. Hydrogen power, fantastic. There's tons of options on the table. But if you go down the path of nuclear reactors, it's a stalling tactic to maintain the bad systems that work at the moment that cause wrecking the environment with pollution. And I shouldn't have even mentioned it because a lot of people will be listening to this and they say, he knows nothing about coal. Well, I know a lot about coal. I know a lot about the companies that do it, and they've made a heck of a mess in some places. Yep. And I've got a solution for them too. They're easy to fix. Most of their big mine sites that nobody wants to fix. They give permission to build gigantic craters in the earth that look like an asteroid hit the planet. And everyone says, well, they paid hundreds of millions of dollars as a license fee to rehabilitate them later. It costs billions to rehabilitate these holes. Some of them are so big that you almost put a city in them. Well, there's the answer. A lot of these coal mine holes could easily be turned into major developments, where the mining company's money that's already held in trust could be used to build massive agricultural storage, earth-covered underground. You build mostly earth-covered, so you'd cover them over with concrete structures to store excess agricultural produce instead of dumping it and forcing prices higher. You actually stockpile wheat, you stockpile wool like we used to on a massive scale in these bunker systems that you create in these huge holes. And they've already been made. It cost billions to make them, but they've already been made, so you could repair them. And all these sites could be then covered with vegetation, be biodiversity friendly again. It requires, someone with a bit of, desire to do something better than leave a hole in the ground. All these whinges about coal. Nobody's out there trying to figure out how to fix the mess they've made. No one. Because it's just one thing. They just see the use of coal. I believe that the nuclear will never happen in Australia. At least not nuclear fission, probably maybe nuclear fusion in 100 years' time or something, maybe that, but even then I'm not so sure. And I believe that if they don't stay on their current process now, we're going to run out of juice, we're going to run out of power. Because these coal-fired power reactors, these coal units are the only things that's providing the power that we have, really, on the scale that we need. Now, look, it's a bit of a misleading thing I should tell you too.
Yeah.
I should tell you it's misleading to say that we need them for baseload power. I mean, coal-fired power stations sort of created the baseload power mentality. If we had more tailor-made energy systems for those particular industrial estates and industrial areas, instead of relying on one gigantic coal-fired monster hundreds of kilometres away, I mean, it just doesn't. It's easier to fix than it is to say, we need to keep coal indefinitely. We don't necessarily need that. We could have major advanced solar systems powering industrial. So we already got it. There's most of the factories on the north coast here have got solar systems powering all the power they need. So it's all doable. Look, I've said too much. What do you want to know?
I think you have actually answered all of my questions. I have thoroughly enjoyed listening to you. You have an incredible brain and such a plethora of knowledge and ideas. And that has actually been absolutely wonderful just to hear your passion and to you touched on so many of the things that I usually ask people anyway. There's a lot of interest around transparency and ethics in government and just why people get into it and even I often ask people how they would get along with the other candidates if it was a hung parliament, or what are they going to do when we have different perspectives and ideas. You actually ticked all the boxes, so nailed it.
Thank you, you're very kind. But can you imagine what's in the community for input, right? Now, look, you take Kevin Hogan up the road in Lismore. He's got this massive office. It's in the middle of town in Lismore. It's a gigantic office. It's got, I think, 2 people working in it. It's an immense office. It's one of the biggest political offices I've ever seen. And it's flash, best furniture. It looks great. And I'm sure he has meetings and everything. But what I'd like to see, not just his, but political offices everywhere, turned into monthly meeting places for the community. Every month, the community goes to the local member's office and puts in what they think should be done, what are solutions that they've thought of. Round table discussions endlessly in every community. Having those, they're already existing. What I'm saying is these political offices cost a lot of money to run, to rent. And they're just mostly empty. They're mostly never used. You go there asking. I asked Kevin Hogan's office for help when my daughter was trapped overseas during COVID, and she couldn't get back in the middle of nowhere. And I went up there and I said, "Look, she's trapped over there, and can you help me?" And this is nothing personal against him, it's the system, But I said, "Can you help me?" Oh, you know what I got? A link to a DFAT website sent to me. That's what I got. A link to a DFAT website. My daughter's trapped overseas along with 500,000 other Australians, regardless of what you think of COVID. And I, as I say, also work in the Health Commission. I used to work in the Institute of Clinical Pathology and Medical Research, and I was in histopathology, but I was, in charge of a medical museum, which was a bit different to, like the top-notch scientists. But I still spoke to them all. My lab was between bacteriology and virology, so I learned all about virology. In fact, I even toyed with the idea of revising the viruses of the world because I knew there was problems with virology, and I used to talk to them about it. I said, well, I think that this is all solvable, and I figured out a way of what viruses actually were. They're not actually, they're living, non-living things. They're not like the rest of the world. This is a very contradictory sort of thing. So, and I think, I know what they are. These things are packages of information that the universe uses to make life fit where it is. And if your life is in there, and it's to exist there, it can only exist there when it comes in contact with the information package of its environment. That's what a virus is. It's an information package that makes life either out or in. So if you get through the thing, you're in. It's a gateway. It's a weird universal gateway for life. Anyway, and I learned something about viruses. I learned something really big about them, and that is that when they started talking about coronavirus, I just looked at them. I just looked around at everybody and said, "What?" I was just speechless because coronavirus. They said, "Oh, this person tested positive for coronavirus," and it was like this terror would run through old people's homes because they're going to get coronavirus. Oh, I've got it. If virtually everybody on the planet, I'll give you a heads up here. Virtually everybody on the planet would test positive for coronavirus. Right? It's one of the commonest viruses of the world. Many species, most of them undescribed, never been named. Cats, dogs, everything carries them. Touch a table, you've got coronavirus. You would have antibodies for coronavirus. You don't need a PCR test, which would never be used for virological analysis. You could never pick a virus from a PCR test. That's ridiculous. But that's like saying, "Oh, I need to put my head under the bonnet of a Holden Kingswood so that I know that I'm okay, my hearing's okay," or something. It's just totally unrelated to reality. But when I realised that the information coming out about coronavirus was not right, I thought, well, hang on. I had a complete set of the Journal of Virology, and I went back through it. The changes made to the coronavirus, the COVID-19 virus, this virus at the time. They were saying, "Oh, it's been manufactured," and I thought, well, yeah. So what? because they were playing around manufacturing coronaviruses for years because they mutate readily and they've been used in weapons research development for since as long as they can do them. And SARS and MERS, which were two probably created coronavirus type structures for military purposes, already existed. And I knew in the Journal of Virology back in 2007, I knew that CSIRO had been mucking around with coronaviruses at the the Australian Institute of Animal Health and Laboratory, in ANL for short, down at Geelong in Victoria, and they'd been mucking around with it down there. And so those four HIV proteins that were added, the introns to the virus, they were actually done in Australia by CSIRO, those first changes. And then that was published in the Journal of Virology in 2010. And then that research went across to the United States to the University of North Carolina and the US Army Weapons Research Development Facility at Fort Detrick in North Carolina. And so they were mucking around with it. And the Chinese were involved in it. So Australia, China and America were all involved in this stuff. They were modifying this virus. They were trying to make something that was probably a defence against a weapon that somebody else might have been making somewhere else. Who knows? It was probably genuine. They were probably trying to make something that could, it's madness of war. And so then the big fly in the ointment came along, and that was Trump getting elected. And he said, what are we doing spending money, giving China money to make what virus? What are we doing? Why are we doing this? And he cut off all their funding, arrested a couple of the scientists, and nobody really realised this truth. It's well known. And then the Chinese researcher at North Carolina immediately evacuated to Canada and escaped to China through Canada with the latest juice from the research. Goes to Wuhan. Do you know that CSIRO was involved in the upgrading of the Wuhan laboratories? Those labs were built in 1955 on the other side of the Wuhan River, and they were about as effective at holding viruses as a sieve would holding water. So, and the CSIRO's geniuses were right up there, and their technologies and intellectual abilities were used to upgrade those labs. So, who's actually asking questions about how did this happen? So they mucked around with the virus. It didn't come from a bat. They said, it came from a bat. And I said, what? I knew straight away. As soon as they said it came from a bat, it was rubbish, because the bats that were in the wet market in Wuhan, they were in hibernation at that time of the year, so they couldn't have been a bat. And I said, hell, those bats are in hibernation. How could they have been a bat for sale then? It just occurred to me straight away. This doesn't add up. And then someone said, oh, it's a pangolin. It was a pangolin, and it might have been in a dog. And so they're plucking animals out of the woodwork to try and make up the fact that it wasn't in a bat. But you know something? This virus that jumped all over the place and was a real virus, a real problem. Not that bad, but it's a problem because of the way it was handled. But it was published in 2000 and I think 15 in the Archives of Virology by Dr. Xu Wenli and others, the bat lady from China, as being a new virus back then. And then they suddenly discovered in 2020, but it was already published in I think it's 2015-6, I can't remember. Archives of Virology. I've got the paper. I can show you the paper. So it was all reported. The literature gives you a clear run that they made this virus, modified it. It was discovered. It was identified. It was spread all over the world, and it got away. And the treatments that they have used have been a problem, to say the least. And there needs to be, which I haven't mentioned in any of my political things yet, but I will if I get elected, a royal commission into the whole.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I believe that there was some form of royal commission into the how effective the vaccines were, and that it was it was actually around the mandatory vaccine requirements, and that it was considered a crime against humanity. That has just recently, but it was never publicised.
Well, to me, you got a quicksand of complicity. Everybody got involved in it. All the chief medical officers, all the health ministers, all the premiers, all the police services, all the scientists that were employed by government, all the doctors, all the nurses. They're all involved. They're all up to their eye teeth in it because they're all playing a part in a system. The system said you had to do this and you had to do that. And then when they make decisions saying that there's a lockdown on the basis of medical information that wasn't there, and that it was a political decision, that's bad.
I think this to me, I just think COVID was one of the biggest drivers of government mistrust, because once we had the information, and it was all hidden in plain sight, because, the way government works, there is supposed to be all of that transparency. But, if you read the fact sheets or you read the introductions to, the medical research papers and all of those things, they didn't actually provide an overview or an introduction to what was actually included within the paper. So, all of this information was available to us. And I think it's indicative of our politicians, and I say this from a position I was on council so I was a councillor when COVID went through, and so I know that it is quite difficult to be across all of the information required of you all the time. So this is not a judgment call, but I think once they became aware of what they were doing wasn't working, then that's when we should
have committed a crime. They're brave enough
to say, stop, we've got to stop now, this isn't working. But they didn't. They went into that whole it's our political career thing.
Once the pharmaceutical companies advised the Australian government of the dangers, which they did, and they still continued down that path, then they became participants in a criminal offence of various types. There was criminality. It's not a criminal offence until it's determined by that in the court of law. But to my way of thinking, I don't think it's unreasonable to say that people dying and being maimed and families being destroyed and jobs being lost and catastrophe economically unfolding is justification for criminal behavioural change, assumptions. I mean, look, when I asked for the help from the federal member here, Mr. Hogan, I got a link to a DFAT website, like I said, right? And I said, look, I'm going to stand against Mr. Hogan later when the next election comes up, because I'm not happy about the way it's been treated. It's not revenge, by the way. This is clear. My concerns are there. DFAT came to my daughter, told my daughter over there when she went to them to please can I come back home, as probably all the 500,000 Australians elsewhere could try to do or whatever. But she went to one. They told her, if you don't take 2 doses of this vaccine, you'll never see your parents again. But if you do take the 2 doses of vaccine, we'll put you on the flight home real quick. So she takes the 2 vaccines and then no flight for months and months. And then she gets these rapid growing cancers in her ovaries, lost all her eggs and her ovaries, still sick. She'll never have children. She's completely healthy and she's finished physically now because of this. Well, how many people are like that? Well, I can tell you what they are. I've checked it. There's hundreds of thousands of people that are the same way. There's somewhere between 15 and 17 million people that are dead after they took the vaccine. There's something in the order of 65 million that were damaged to the extent they'll never work again. There's several million who were put in wheelchairs. I mean, this is wrong. This should be addressed by government. This government not raising its head. They talk about submarines. It's going to be sunk. Their careers. There are people in this country now that are so angry about the way they were treated. It wasn't about whether you're anti-vax. I'm never anti-vax. I've had more vaccines than a spiny. I've had more needles in a spiny anteater. I've had needles for everything. I've had needles jammed in my arms for this, for tuberculosis when I was working in the lab. Every conceivable type of toxin and disease. You've got to take this one. You're working next to this lab that's got such and such, and they're carrying people away on trolleys. That we've got disease in Vietnam or something. And all of a sudden they're giving me some injection. What the hell's this? Tuberculosis. I never had tuberculosis in my life, and all of a sudden I get a tuberculosis thing pumped into me. Look, I'm not anti-vax. Never was anti-vax. But I soon became anti-COVID-19 because this COVID business was wrong. And the government failing to take the lead on righting this wrong is an act of betrayal of this nation. I cannot recall anything as bad. And the people are silently fuming over it. The people that took the vaccine that were made to, otherwise they would have lost their jobs, these poor people. The people that I didn't take the vaccine because I knew it was not going to be effective. So I lost all my work doing scientific survey works for all sorts of big projects. They wouldn't let me on the sites. I was hired by the New South Wales government to monitor mining companies' activities, and if I said no, they had to stop the mine dead in its tracks. So I was making sure they were doing the right thing in some of these mines. I couldn't get on site because I didn't have the tick for the vaccine. So I just said, okay, fine. If I get someone else, send out to hire somebody from a high school or something to go and do the work, because nobody that could do it was available, because all the scientists, the serious scientists that knew what they were doing, wouldn't touch the vaccine with 10-foot pole. So, but we're all, ones that took it and ones that didn't take it, are all in the same boat in one way or another. We're all furious. We've been betrayed. And, I'm not going in to be, to have any reasonable chance of being elected. who am I? But I did buy a suitcase at the local op shop to drag that down to Canberra, in case in case somebody says, yeah, for some miracle you got in. My God, I can't believe you got in. Maybe the donkey vote. I don't know. I love donkeys, by the way. They're beautiful animals. But look, I could talk on this for days. My wife says, Hannah, she's got this really thing. She says, please let this woman talk. So I'll cop this when I get out of this interview. I'll cop this because I'm telling you, I'm doing to you what you didn't want me to do.
It's totally fine.
No, but I know. I wouldn't tell you unless I thought you could understand and listen to what I was saying. I wouldn't say it. I wouldn't do it. I'm particular who I talk to. I am really particular who I talk to. Not because I'm a snob, because I instantly know who can understand straight away. I can feel it straight away. It's right through the screen. Can't I, sweetie?
Yeah, what are you saying?
Well, I'm just trying to defend myself against the constant talking.
No,
Look, what's the strategy?
No, it's actually I've actually really enjoyed the conversation. You've actually blown my mind. I'm just so impressed.
I'm not like any politician you'll ever meet. I'm not.
No, look, politician's a dirty word to me. So.
Yeah, but look, if
we should get the whole recording or just a little bit.
Yeah, no. So I will give you the whole recording. So what'll happen when I stop the recording? Actually, I'll just stop it now. So then we can